Looking forward to lean in the environment, which is, as we know, extremely important, and I think we're going to learn quite a bit. In talking with the folks as we were setting up, I think you will have a great experience with some good hands-on opportunities to learn. So thank you. So I would like to introduce the presenters that we have today. First we have Mike O'Donnell. Mike is the Associate Director of Manufacturing Extension Partnership, the MEV program, and the Director of the EDA University Center program for the Center for Industrial Research and Service at Iowa State Extension and Outreach, called CIRAS. In addition to his leadership responsibilities, he assists companies in sustainability, supply chain management, and business continuity planning. He has a bachelor's and master's in mechanical engineering from Bucknell University and an MBA from Iowa State University. Prior to joining CIRAS, Mike worked in the defense industry for 6 years in a variety of manufacturing, project, and program management roles. He then moved to Australia, where he spent 18 months leading engineering and quality for a variety of products for the nation's leading small appliance brand. In his various positions, his focus has been on operations management and process and quality improvement in all aspects of the supply chain. So I'd like to welcome Mike. Our second presenter is Brion Hurley, over there against the wall. He's a principal Lean Six Sigma Black Belt at Rockwell Collins in Cedar Rapids. He has a bachelor's degree in statistics and a master's in quality management and productivity from the University of Iowa. He is a certified Six Sigma Black Belt from the American Society for Quality and a Lean Master certified through Rockwell Collins. He is also a senior certified sustainability professional from the Global Sustainability Institute of Technology, and recently obtained a certificate of sustainability from the University of Iowa, and obtained a Green Manufacturing Specialist certification from the Society of Manufacturing Engineers. He has been involved in process improvement for over 14 years. I'd like to welcome also Brion. And with that, again, thank you very much. Logistics, restrooms are back out this door to the main entrance where you came in, and then to the right at the end of the hall. And please, again, help yourself to beverages and any pastries we have left. And then I think I'll turn it over to Mike and Brion. And thank you very much for presenting, and look forward to a great session today. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for everybody for coming today. We've got a kind of a busy day of activities, so what the intent today is to go through and kind of give you an introduction to some of these concepts, so at least you're familiar with it, you've heard of it. So as you see these things come down, hopefully more frequently in the future, you've got that awareness that, and I remember hearing a little bit about that, and have a little bit of background. We're also going to give you a list of resources from material that we've gotten over the years, or we found that we think would be beneficial, so you can kind of do your own research and look at some of these topics in a little bit more detail. So not intended to deep dive into any specific concept here, but just kind of give you an overview, and then we're going to go through some simulations a little bit later. Oh, there's you have to flip the back switch, I think. There. So the term lean and green is something you might have heard. There's also green manufacturing, which is kind of based out of manufacturing, because that's usually where a lot of the environmental waste will be most prevalent. But it applies to all processes as well. So what we're going to do is talk about just some basic concepts. We'll talk about some tools that are applicable or might be related or slightly modified in order to look at environmental impacts, and a couple processes and guides for how to proceed and try to identify some of those issues. And then towards the second and third part of this session, we're going to go through simulations. First one will be on a manufacturing process and how you can identify and look for environmental wastes. And then we're also going to do a way to identify the solid waste and your trash, and try to categorize that and come up with data so you can make good decisions about how to go after some of the reduction of landfill.
So before we kind of dive into some of the specific topics about how lean and green interact, I wanted to quickly hit on sustainability as a concept and where everything falls together. When we talk about sustainability at CIRAS, we talk about the triple bottom line. So when I do overviews of green and sustainability, the first slide I put up before this is typically, it says green is not equal to sustainability. Green is a portion of sustainability. So when you're talking about sustainability, you're looking at how can I make sure everything I do matches the financial, social, and environmental needs of my business and the environment around me. So my community, the natural environment, all those types of activities. And one of the keys here is that when you're talking green, don't just do green for the sake of green. We saw, 10, 15 years ago, a lot of companies doing that. They were getting social pressures to do green activities, and they were doing what was essentially called bearable activities, right? So they were losing money by doing things that were supposed to be nice for the environment, therefore making their stakeholders happy, but it made no financial sense. Over the past 10 years or so, companies have really started to get, if it doesn't make financial sense, don't do it. There are a lot of great opportunities to do green projects that make financial sense, and lean is one of the great approaches to that. So lean, you tend to focus on the financial and a lot of the social side too, with the culture areas. Green manufacturing should not be viewed kind of as this other thing that you do. It integrates well into lean, and you'll see a lot of the ways the tools integrate well throughout the day. But it really integrates with everything you do as a business. So if you think of green as something else you do, it tends to not be as successful. If you integrate it into your current activities, into your strategic planning, into your supply chain management, into your lean activities, that's when you're going to start to see real results from the green activity. It's not just something else you do. It's really part of a sustainability solution as opposed to just its own thing. So that hopefully gives you a bit of a framework as to where we're going to come from this. We're going to touch on it a couple times today. Everybody knows lean activities can save you a lot of money. What you'll see today is that green activities can save you probably just as much if you approach them the right way. And Brian's going to show you a bunch of tools from the lean side that help you do that. And then at the end, we're going to talk about, what are the approaches to implementing it? How can you either integrate it with your lean activities or approach it from another direction too? So I think that's all I have on this one. I'll pass it back to Brian here. Oh wait, this is, yeah, I forgot about this one. So when we talk about waste and green, this is the approach that we take. So everybody knows about eliminating waste from the lean perspective. That's how we approach green too. So with very few exceptions, if you as a business can focus on your water, air, solid waste, toxics and chemicals, and energy, if you can reduce or eliminate all of the waste associated with those, you're going to be a pretty green company. Actually doing that is a little harder. Actually understanding where you fit into the supply chain and where your biggest impacts are can also be a little harder. But this is the framework we're going to use, and we'll show you a little more at the end about how to approach that. But really, in lean, when you do like a value stream map, you're very specifically going after certain wastes. All you do in the green world is kind of expand your view of what the wastes are and look at different wastes. And you can systematically go through and go after your water waste, your air waste, your solid waste, right down the line, and eventually you will be a green company. And that's kind of the framework you're going to see us use as we go through some of the stuff towards the end of this, and then through the simulations. And the simulations, the first one, you'll see us trying to hit all of these wastes right across the board. And then we're going to specifically focus in and show you some of the tools on the solid waste side to give you an idea of how to approach going after your solid waste. From my perspective, most companies in Iowa that have two real easy business cases on green: solid waste and energy. Most companies, I'm going to guess most of you have some sort of energy reduction activities in your plants. Fairly mature process to go out and go after energy improvements. Brian's going to show you some tools on that. The solid waste is something that a lot of companies ignore, and we're going to hopefully give you some tools to go after that a little more systematically, like you would most of your other tools. Now I'll pass it back to Brian.
Okay. So that's a good point. So each company may have different things that fit, with works best for them and where their opportunity is. So it's not just a blanket, well, everybody should go after toxins, or everybody should go after air emissions. So again, it's up to your company to kind of decide what is the most beneficial to you and what fits your products and services that you offer. So a lot of people might think, well, isn't environmental issues, aren't those already part of doing business, and aren't those already incorporated into lean today? And I think for the most part they are, but there's a couple issues that come up that maybe prevent that from being more visible or easier to identify. So the first one is that a lot of times those costs are just looked at as cost of doing business. Oh, we have this electric bill, it must be how much we need to run our business, so it's a sunk cost at that point. So, or we have landfill pickup charges. Well, that's just how much we get charged, and they don't really look at it as an opportunity to evaluate that and really understand. We know why we're getting charged and what's the breakdown, and is there opportunity there to reduce that cost. So just looking at it as opportunity is the first step. Next one is the ability to break down that information or those bills into departments or areas based upon who uses it. For example, water. So how does water get allocated out at your facilities? Or electricity, how do those get assigned out to different departments and areas? Does anyone know how their bills get allocated today at their facility?
Overhead?
Overhead. Maybe by number of employees, maybe it's assigned out, or by square footage, perhaps. Probably not isolated to this particular area, is metered up, and you get an actual breakdown. So in a business, you might look at it, and if the area that's the biggest user of, let's say, solid waste gets charged the same as another area that's very low, there's not really an incentive there for them to reduce it. If they look at it just from a budget, or here's what I'm responsible for. You have to make that argument that that's the right thing to do for the company, and that yes, they're not going to necessarily see the direct benefit to their budget. So by not having that detail, sometimes it can be kind of like, I feel like there's not a control over those expenses, so why should, of all the things I got to work on, why should I focus on that? So just being able to allocate the usage of those waste down to the right people is difficult. Other thing is just looking for some of these opportunities. In lean, we talk about going to the gemba or going to where the work is done. And some of these opportunities actually show up when the work's not being done, such as the usage of energy, or the usage of water, or going to when nobody's there and seeing what's happening as a facility. So the facility is kind of the user, or where the work's being done, and looking at it from that perspective, which is operating 24/7. So we'll touch on what we've done at Rockwell to try to address some of those things. Another thing is just trying to understand what are the human impacts and the environmental impacts of some of these wastes, and are we capturing those somehow and holding them into our business case for the improvements we want to make? Are we really trying to understand what those impacts are? So what kind of community impact do we have if we were able to clean the water up and put less chemicals through that process? Or if we're able to change energy sources from utility to generating your own electricity. What is the social impact of that? And is there other costs that we're not considering? So being able to identify some of those additional things that are benefits, that more than just the payback of the dollars itself. And then I think the last thing I'll mention, that why this isn't really part of most lean efforts today, is the side benefits really aren't really understood well enough to see that there's other things that can help out with, or side benefits that come apart with some of these initiatives. So for example, a lot of companies now are being held to knowing what their products and services are, and then being able to, are responsible for those at the end of its life. So just because there's a sale or transaction with your customer doesn't mean you've lost all your liability now. You still are responsible for that product through its entire life. So if your product starts to show up in the landfill, more and more companies are being held to have that responsibility to deal with it. So a lot of that's coming down through European rules, but as we become more global, those are impacting everybody now. So one of the things that companies are doing is like a take-back program where they're offering, hey, bring back your product to us and we will either take care of it for you or recycle it for you. We can maybe do something with that versus just putting it in the landfill. And they might look at that as boy, that's an extra cost for us, but it's probably the right thing to do, so we should do that. But maybe what they're not realizing is here's a perfect opportunity to interact with your customers, understand why they're using your product, understand what they like and don't like about your product. Maybe offer them an incentive to upgrade or maybe a discount of some sort to purchase a newer product. So you've just created an opportunity to interact with your customer. And how do you value that interaction? As maybe you look at it as just a cost here, but it actually could be almost a marketing tool for your company. Same thing with talent acquisition. As you do some of these efforts and you get some recognition for that, you might be opening yourself up to a wider talent pool that might be interested in working for your company because of some of the efforts you're doing. And that's hard to put a price tag on that type of thing. Or just employee engagement. People involved in getting involved in these activities, making a difference in the community and the environment, makes them more engaged, prouder to work at the company, more motivated. And so that's hard to put a dollar amount to, but trying to understand some of these impacts and at least make them part of the business case, even if you can't necessarily quantify them directly, can help make these more worthwhile to go after. Any questions about that, or anyone have any other thoughts about that? And this works really well in terms of just pure payback and reductions. These approaches work. Applying lean to these issues, you're seeing these numbers: 60% reduction, tens of thousands of pounds of reduction in waste or water usage, 6 tons of waste avoided from the landfill. Those are our typical lean numbers that we're used to seeing. Well, the same thing is showing up when you focus on some of these environmental issues, and you're looking maybe across your whole company as an opportunity. And when you roll those up, it's a pretty big number. Even IBM came out and said they estimated about 2-to-1 payback on their initiatives that they invested in. So there's a couple other examples in the Skybook. So EPA has done a really good job with trying to roll up and summarize how lean applies to these environmental issues. And that will be in your list of resources at the end here. But there's a lot of other examples out there that kind of show that this works and the approach works great, just like it does for any other lean issue that you're trying to resolve. So as you're applying lean just by itself, and this is the key message here, is lean implementation is going to get you environmental benefits by default, because you're taking out, reducing resource waste that you have, you're taking time out of the process, you're condensing your floor space down. All those things will have some kind of environmental impact. But there's also specific tools and ways to focus on the environmental piece that will also turn around and get you lean benefits as well. So they work hand in hand. And but I think the clear message, and kind of what Mike mentioned earlier, is focus on your business piece and understand what are the key things of your business that you want to drive from an environmental perspective, not just to pick anything that sounds good. So we'll go through a couple different examples here of things that are either modified slightly or maybe a new approach to help try to identify some of these issues. And again, it's about trying to see the waste. And a lot of these things maybe have not been visible. And what we wanted to try to share is make them a little more visible in your day-to-day activities so you can roll them in and identify them as problems and then follow the same approach that you would any other problem. So the first one here is just adding different examples into your existing definitions of 7 forms of waste. Okay, so when we have overproduction, obviously that's additional raw materials that we're using up. Okay, well, raw materials are limited, and over time those are become more and more scarce. So the less we don't waste up front, the better off we're going to be in the long run. The longer we can sustain our current products and services that we have. Inventory, here's a good example. So if we need to have additional space available to store maybe stuff we built or supplied parts that we bring in, we have to have lighting for that area, which costs energy. We have to probably heat and cool that space, which drives our heating costs and our electricity usage. And we increase the risk of damaging or having something corrode. You're just exposing yourself to having more issues there by carrying more inventory. So there's that benefit of, if you keep your inventory down lower, then you can minimize some of those impacts as well. Transportation, there's emissions that come with transportation. So we talk about transportation and lean in terms of time that we're spent moving things around, but there's also an environmental impact, and there's packaging and extra packaging involved to ship and move something from one place to another. And there's the possibility of getting damage and spills during that transportation. And are we really capturing those issues as part of our business case? And maybe that's the thing that's missing to get you over the top to sell your idea to your management, is maybe we're not capturing all these potential impacts that we could have. Defects, same thing. So if we have to redo something, obviously we're probably have to throw something away. And now we've generated solid waste or maybe hazardous waste in the process. So by going after these wastes, you're, like I said, naturally going to address some of these other issues. But you can also kind of focus in on some of these areas and go the other direction. And make that the priority, and you'll get some other benefits as well. So if we cut down the transportation time to save on emissions, we're naturally going to speed up our process. Okay, any questions about that? Anyone have any examples they want to share, or you can think of offhand?
At Allsteel, one of the things that we've done is we've pushed to try and reduce the number of parts delivered to the line side. And what that's essentially forced us to do over the years is reduce our container size. And what we were finding is our suppliers were sending us boxes. And so we're spending the time and labor to open all the boxes. And so by essentially reducing the number of parts at the line inventory, it forced us to go back to our supplier and say, okay, we want them delivered in smaller lots, and potentially, down the road, we ended up getting to returnables. So instead of boxes, we ended up using returnables. So you're exactly right here, the points you're making.
Yeah, so we'll talk about stuff like that, is to just evaluate, from that perspective of getting just the sizes down is naturally driving that environmental impact, or you're looking at the amount of cardboard generated in your facility and saying, how do we get that down? Hey, we can go to containers, reusable containers, and we're getting that side benefit there. So here's just some general questions you can ask, and again, going back to this WASTE acronym. How much water is being used? Where is it coming from? Is there opportunity to reuse that water before we send it down through our out for discharge? Or can we reduce the amount of contaminants that are in the water? Where are those contaminants coming from? Those are questions you can look at. Air emissions, what are the type of air emissions? Do you have permitting issues you need to be concerned about? Is there a way to get your levels down so you don't have the same level that you need to be adhering to? Can you reduce the amount of travel down? Solids, we're going to talk about solids in our simulation here, but looking at the amount generated and the type too, to understand what's the breakdown, and is there a way to reuse, or is someone else interested in my waste? Is there opportunity to give my waste to somebody else instead of having someone come and pick it up? So just evaluating that, really understand maybe that is a valuable commodity for somebody else. You might think it's trash, but someone else could find a use for it. And toxins, again, just trying to understand what do you have in your facility? Where is it coming from? How do we reduce it down? Also looking at the processing to see, maybe if we can eliminate some issues where we're having to use these chemicals, fixing the real root cause of the problem might eliminate this extra cleaning or extra packaging or touch-up that goes on where we're using some of these extra chemicals on. And then energy side, where is your energy coming from? Do you understand, even just looking at the bills that you have and trying to break that down and understand where the costs are and the usage comes from. So you can have a better understanding of what's really happening in your facility. And is there opportunity? One of the things we identified in our large facility in Cedar Rapids, our C Avenue complex, was a high amount of energy usage all the time, kind of that base load usage, which is maybe like 60% of the total was happening on the weekends and at night. And so you would think that you'd have a big drop off from when our production was running versus the rest of the facility. But just looking at that data and trying to understand it helps point you in the right direction to say we should be looking at the off hours in a little bit more detail, because there's actually something going on there that doesn't really match what you would expect to see for our usage. And then like light bulbs are a pretty common, easy, quick win in terms of reducing energy costs. Even through lean improvements and kind of consolidating down processes into common areas, you're keeping the space down, and do you need as much facility space to get the job done? Or is there different sources of energy you can look at? Gets into maybe some renewables.
So, one of the issues, and I don't think lean has as much of a problem with it as it used to, but it's definitely there in green, is understanding what the return on investment is, and understanding the real cost of what you're doing. Anybody have an idea here how much their business spends on trash? A lot. A surprisingly high amount. So anybody know how much it costs to get a ton of waste hauled away from their facility? In Iowa,
$75.
how much?
$75.
That's about as high as it gets. There are some areas in the state where it's as low as $20 a ton. 30 to 60 is kind of the norm. That's a lot of money, because you don't just have a ton of trash all the way, you have several tons. Sometimes several tons a day. And that adds up. So we tend to work mostly with mid-sized businesses. An average mid-sized business that we're going to work with is going to have about $100,000 a year in direct cost of throwing away their material. That alone pretty much provides you a business case to go after getting rid of that trash. But anybody here like to do financial analysis and numbers? Anybody else a geek like me? I love to play with numbers. So the disposal costs are just a tiny little portion of your total cost of throwing something away. You've got, your handling, right? You've got somebody at your factory who's moving trash around, who's moving waste around. Just like in lean, that's something you're going to go after. You've got lost time, you've got cost of utilities, cost of raw materials, cost of money. There's a dozen things you can add on here to really understand what the total cost of waste is. And depending on the business, and we've seen some companies do some analysis on this, total cost of waste, this says 20 times, the real number is probably between 5 times and 20 times. So if you spend $100,000 a year on trash, it's really somewhere between $500,000 and $2 million of actual cost of moving your waste around. That's a pretty easy business case. And what you're going to find is not only are you getting rid of that cost of waste, but if you're going after solid waste, because that's a nice easy example to talk through here, you probably have a lot of other benefits with it. Just like with lean, right? You can get direct costs in terms of improved speed, reduced touch time, all that kind of stuff. But on the other side of it, you've got a lot of side benefits. And you're going to find the same thing when you go through the grain stuff here. So take some time to go find out what your cost of waste is. I think you guys will all be surprised. That's like we talked about at the beginning. It's one of those things that's in your overhead, and not a lot of people see it, not a lot of people look at it. And when you're looking at the big picture, $100,000 $100,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money yet. Sometimes a few $100,000 doesn't seem like a huge opportunity to go after. But once you start thinking about some of all the other costs associated with it, it really adds up. The cardboard boxes, that's a perfect example. Switching from cardboard to reusable packaging. You are buying cardboard from your supplier, moving it around, heating it, cooling it, storing it, and then throwing it away. Adds zero value to your end product. There are a lot of solid materials that you do that kind of stuff with in your facility. That's very expensive to do. So when you're thinking about going after some of these green opportunities, don't just look at your disposal costs. Make sure you kind of open up that umbrella a little and see what some of your other costs are. These are hard to estimate what they are, but you can, and you can at least get your arms around it. And if you want an easy example, take your annual trash cost and multiply it times 5. And that'll at least get you an idea as to where your total cost is around for your solid waste. You're going to see similar things with your toxic wastes, not quite the same thing with energy or water or anything like that. But in terms of solid waste and toxic waste and chemicals and materials, you're going to find a lot of these things to be fairly consistent from business to business.
This is an example that was published in ASQ and from company Techmotive. And what they did is they broke out the waste and gave an example of the improvements they did to address that particular form of waste, and then also what the benefits were on the back end. But if you read that article, what you find pretty interesting is it talked a lot about sub-optimization of their processes. So what they did is actually it was counterintuitive to what you might think, but when they looked at their full value stream, they actually, you'll understand why. They had an early process that was a cleaning process where they looked at the temperature and, obviously at the higher temperature that you run your equipment or you run your washing machine at home, the more energy you're going to use because you've got to heat that up higher. They actually turned up the heat on one of the early processes because they realized that they were spending a lot of back-end process dealing with the lack of cleaning that it was getting done. So they had multiple cleaning processes afterwards, which were additional chemicals, time, more water, and more heat. And so they actually, by what would look like not even optimizing that single process, making it worse or spending more energy up front, they actually were able to eliminate a lot of back-end processes. So kind of reiterate the point of look at your value stream and understand what's the best thing for the whole value stream, not for this particular machine and this process. Turning down that temperature would have actually created a bigger problem further down the line and added more waste to the process. So I thought that was a good kind of tie with the forms of waste and also the concept around value stream mapping and sub-optimization. And then just in general, 5 Whys is always a great tool regardless of the type of problem you're dealing with. So you can take something like water usage and trace it back down to corrosion of where you're storing your particular parts. And that corrosion ends up causing all these extra processes to come into play. So if you can go into some kind of prevention around that corrosion, now you've eliminated all these extra process steps and environmental issues that come along with it. So again, just make sure that you're always kind of digging down to root cause of your issues. And you'll find out if you can address it at that level, you can really make some big improvements there.
And I just want to toss in here, this is a really good example of a side benefit of going through the 5 Whys. This exact set of questions here. There are now some products out there, and one company is kind of leading the way, is for this specific problem, is there's a new non-chemical based cleaning system that can actually get some real great high levels of purity on your metals before you store them, and you can run them through this wash system so that you don't have to use those oils to prevent corrosion. So that you can get them nice and clean so that they're not going to corrode, and all of that stuff goes away. So one of the side benefits of this is, you start asking the right questions, and not only can you really start to eliminate your waste, but you can find whole new product ideas and whole new markets to get into if you can design the equipment to be able to handle that. So that's just another kind of side benefit for this specific example that you can kind of see where some of the other returns are for green.
And we don't actually get into that too much today on kind of getting into with your customers and trying to provide a more green product or service that you have, and some of the innovation that can come out of that, and being ahead of the game on helping define new requirements for those areas. So that's a whole another opportunity of growth and benefits of being more environmentally friendly that can help grow your business as well. So that's a whole nother discussion, but other good benefits as well.
You know, Brian, can you go back to that slide for a second?
Yep.
You know, just reading through it, I think that 5 why is so cool because, you know, you start to think about, okay, what's my inventory size, what's my waiting cycle time, you know, so the whole point of the oil was to prevent corrosion. Well, if you could decrease, you know, your lot size or even the time that I'm in inventory, you might not even be spending all that water. So it is a really intriguing, you know, process to get people kind of thinking about, well, maybe we can just prevent our, you know, storage.
We're fixing that at Kinsey. We are ordering some parts using an MRP system. We made some schedule changes, but MRP already had those parts come to us. So now they're sitting, we didn't have anywhere to put them, so we sat them outside. Now they're all rusty, so yeah, that's a really good point.
So the other thing is if you stop short here, you end up looking at additional steps to maybe we need to add more paint here or more oil. You know, so if you don't go deep enough, you might actually just make the problem worse. Or get into it. And I think I mentioned you guys will have these slides available to you, so you can reference there or read them. So, and then most of you might be familiar with the DMAIC approach for process improvement, where you define, measure, analyze, improve, control, kind of a standard on the Six Sigma side for running projects or improvement efforts. Jacksonville, I think it's Energy Authority, added a G into their DMAIC called Green It Up. And what that does is it forces them to stop at that point of, they've got to root cause after the analyze phase. They've probably got a list of ideas, but they want to run it through and make sure they're not going to negatively impact air quality, water quality, or any kind of environmental issues. And so it kind of forces that discussion to happen. And maybe there's some opportunities to eliminate or address some of those problems before you go into the improve phase, or the I toll gate there, and to really make sure there's a conscious effort there to focus on it. So they had added and kind of modified their approach to make that stand out. One of the other things that Rockwell's been doing is Energy Go and See, and Carolyn can talk, you can ask her a little bit more details about this. She's been leading that effort. But to kind of get at the discussion around finding the waste and seeing the waste when it wasn't even the same time period that when the work is happening. We've set up some Go and See at different facilities, and what we've done is set up a kind of a kickoff training on here's what our business case is for doing this. It's the same kind of approach you do for any lean event. But the difference is you got, all these steps are pretty much the same, but during the running of the events, you actually have observations that take place on the weekend. So either come in like a Saturday or a Sunday when nobody's working, and you're making the observations at that point. Trying to understand what's being left on, what am I hearing? Is there air leaks going on? Do I hear water dripping? Do I see condensation? Do I feel that the air temperature is really cold over here or really hot over here? So what is on, or what's driving that heat and cooling? Is there air leaks? Is there window leaks there? A lot of things that you may not be able to detect during the process, and especially you would expect to be completely gone or not there during off hours. So those opportunities have, I think, really accomplished two things. One has got the employees engaged in being able to see that waste and see those opportunities and start looking for those things. So maybe they didn't see as much stuff today during the event, but now 2 weeks from now they say, hey, I've kind of noticed that those lights have been on now more than normal, or the equipment is always running when I come in the morning. I wonder what happened. Did someone change the schedule on that? So at least being able to aware and conscientious of those issues. And that came out of an idea we saw from GE. They called it Energy Treasure Hunt. But what they did is they conducted about 200 events, and they identified $110 million worth of opportunity. Now, I didn't say how much of it they actually implemented there, but they're averaging $500,000 per event that they're finding an opportunity to reduce. And so at Rockwell, what we did is we tried to break out the behavioral type of things, shutting things off, shutting them off when you're done, putting them on standby mode, making sure there's timers, those type of behavioral process things. We tried to separate those out from the facility capital infrastructure things like lighting and changing out the HVAC equipment, moving to more energy efficient type things there. So, and Rockwell had actually set aside a pool of money just dedicated to energy reduction efforts. Because sometimes those get dwarfed in the big picture of, hey, I got a leaky roof over here. Why would I want to spend money on energy efficiency over here? So trying to allocate money out and keep it protected somehow. That was a big challenge that they were able to do that by having a dedicated a pool of money and a dedicated resource that was managing that money. So also same thing like with water. It's kind of a concept about getting people together who work in that area and going to watch and observe what's going on, focus specifically on either energy or water or solid waste or toxins or hazardous material, those types of things. Same concept you would do with lean, it's just a dedicated effort to look at areas such as water usage at process equipment level for cooling and heating, maybe the toilet, showers, kitchens, landscaping, outdoor stuff. Just looking at those different areas and seeing where is there opportunity, but actually physically going out there at different times and just making observations. A lot of times those aren't really the high priority areas to look at. We're looking at the processes and the equipment that run our products and services, not necessarily the kind of support structure that goes with it.
Sure. So waste stream maps are a great analog to a value stream map. You can use the exact same process, all of the same tools, and you just simply add a little more information onto it. So you know what a value stream map looks like. This looks a lot the same, and if you just flip to the next slide here. This is kind of what you want to really do. You can either integrate it with a value stream map or do it as a standalone activity. And it's a little bit of a better way to more specifically figure out where your wastes are. So what you want to do is, for each process, you want to look at the inputs: water, air, solids, toxics, and energy. And then your waste: water, air, solids, toxic, and energy. Right? So in this example, on a laser cut here, you're not using any chemicals, so your toxics are blank. You can look at, what are your solid material inputs and your solid wastes. So essentially for each item here, you can get an efficiency for all of your waste items, and this will help you start to say, where are my biggest opportunities? Now, one of the things that makes it hard is it's not exactly a one-for-one, or it doesn't make it wonderfully clear as to where you need to go after. So say this one is 1 ton a week of solids and 0.2 of a ton of solid waste per week, so that's 80% efficiency. That may be good, it may be bad, it depends on the type of product you're using, it depends on the process that you're using. You might want to go after the waste. How do you prevent that 0.2 of a ton from happening? You might also want to go away from the topside input and say, well, how do I reduce, instead of buying 1 ton a week, how do I only buy a 0.5 ton a week? Right, so you can keep the same efficiency and lower your inputs. There's a lot of different variables to play with here, but going through this process, walking through your plant and breaking down the inputs and outputs for each step with the waste categories really helps you understand at the process level where your opportunities are. So most of your business level measurements, energy, all those types of things are in your overhead. They're hard to figure out where they go. This will help get you a better answer, a more precise way to say, that machine, that's where my problem is. That's what I need to go after, and it will give me a lot of green benefits. So this is a great way to do it. especially if you're already doing lean and value stream maps. We've gone into companies who've done value stream maps, done a waste stream map. It takes about 10 minutes of training to say, hey, instead of doing a value stream map, you just add waste in and waste out and you're done. And that's the training for it, and then you just dive in and start doing it. It's a lot easier to figure out as you go once you've done a value stream map. So it's a really neat tool to go after some of the waste. Anybody here ever done a waste stream map? Try it. That's all the information you need. If you've done value stream maps, go ahead and try it and see how it works out. We've had some pretty good results in the few that we've done. So
How would you estimate the energy waste?
that's hard. That's the hardest one. Energy input's pretty easy, right? You can put a meter on the machine and that kind of stuff. With the energy waste, what you're really going to look at is how much of the time are you actually doing something with that energy. So if you have an oven, for example, and that oven is on 24 hours a day, but only 3 hours a day is product actually running through that. So your energy waste is 21 out of 24 hours. That tends to be how you do that. That's harder to do, but it gives you a really good idea as to how often you're using it. And things like ovens and those types of things tend to be your big energy wasters in those types of activities. So this is where you start to look at the trade-offs. One of the things in our green classes we really focus on is trade-offs, right? So the fun thing with green is there's no easy answer. And it's usually about analyzing two different opportunities and what the trade-offs are and coming to your best decision. Typically with lean, you want to move towards flow as much as possible, right? If you're on the green side and you're looking at an oven that you're only really having product run through 3 hours a day, maybe your best answer is to batch it up and then only run that oven 3 hours a day. What's the cost of running the oven 3 hours a day versus 24 hours a day? And you start to kind of open that aperture as to what you're looking at, the total cost of your product. And so then you have to start dealing with that trade-off. Well, is it more efficient to run a single piece flow, or is it more efficient to shut that off and batch it up in that process there? So does that kind of answer your question? Good. Okay.
Is anyone familiar with this QDIP or anything similar to this, where it's like a visual control for a process? Anyone seen that before? So I like this because it's really nice. Each of these diagrams is broken up into different days of the month. And so the idea is that you have these different criteria that makes it either a green or a red for that day. And so at the end of each day, you go through and say, okay, did we meet our criteria for safety? And if we did, we put a green color in that. And if we didn't, we put a red. And so you can take a step back and anybody can walk up to a process and say, looks like we're having some issues here. Or looks good, or what's going on here, there's some issues. Definitely major problems. And so usually you got your safety, your quality, delivery, inventory, productivity, and maybe there's an environmental one that you can add into that diagram, or somewhere on your visual controls, or your scorecard, or your process boards, and try to highlight and try to drive it as part of the business. And part of the process is taking care of things like shutting off the equipment and taking care of the recyclables, and make sure you've got adherence on how you're handling and dealing with hazardous waste. So that could be an evaluation or another thing that people are kind of judged on or evaluated against. Overall equipment effectiveness, has anyone dealt with this before or familiar with OEE? So it's a way of kind of assessing a process or an equipment to determine how well is it performing in terms of availability. So is it up and running when I need it? Is it performing at the right speed and efficiency that we expect? And am I getting the quality output that is needed? So ideally you get 100% on all of those and you have an overall score of 100%. And what Infor is suggesting is maybe there's an energy consumption aspect of this where you can monitor and keep a track of how much energy is being used by the equipment. They're saying over time, as your equipment starts to degrade or lose performance, it'll start to actually use more energy than what it was originally designed for. So if you can monitor that or keep an eye on it, that'll start to degrade your OEE score and maybe highlight that we've got some issues that we need to tighten up something in the system, we need to perform preventative maintenance on the equipment, or we've got some fundamental issue that is going on before, maybe anticipating before you actually have a a shutdown or the machine breaks. Defect concentration chart. I like this chart because it's a good way to talk about data that really isn't number based. It's about location of where the location is telling you the story of what's going on. So maybe for employee complaints about room temperature, you could put a red dot somewhere where you get hot complaints and blue where you get cold complaints. And you, over time, as you start to plot these out, you can start to see here's a lot of hot issues here, a lot of cold issues here. Maybe there's something structurally that's not working right, and we need to look at our venting and our controls in that area, look at our temp settings. But visually, it might highlight those issues a little easier than just looking at individual complaints and trying to see a pattern that way. Okay, then one of the other things with the, some of these utility costs like energy and usage is it varies. It's not a consistent user. So especially like electricity, one of the big drivers is going to be the time of the year. So your utility bill fluctuates. If you have heat and electricity, your heat's going to start kicking in now, and you're starting seeing that bill go up, and your electricity may go up a lot more in the summer if you have air conditioning. So it gets difficult for a facility to try to predict what is reasonable costs for this time of year based upon weather and other factors that go into it. Every year isn't the same, so I can't do a one-to-one comparison to last year and just say, well, it's a little bit higher, so that's good or bad. So one thing you can do is actually try to put some statistics around it and say, well, if I know what my energy usage was and I was tracking some other variables that go along with it, such as how many employees do we have at this time, how much output do we have from our manufacturing or some of our other processes, what is the temperature outside, and how many shifts are we working, how much overtime was done. There's other factors you can kind of apply there. And you can do some analysis to figure out what are the key drivers of that usage. And obviously, this one came out and said average temperature, high temperature was a driver. So you might think, okay, well, we can't really control the weather, so we're kind of stuck with that. And we don't want to reduce our employee count. That's not a good thing, just to save energy. And we don't want to reduce our output. This one is like a spares output. That's not, we don't want to lower our output. So people might think, well, that's kind of out of our control. That's kind of what the cost is. We just got to deal with it. But if you think about it a little bit more, what drives the temperature? So something is impacted by outside temperature. What are the things that kick in? What changes when the temperature changes? Okay, humidity. That might be something you want to look at, see if that's a factor or not. But when it gets cold outside, what happens to your facility that drives energy usage? Okay, your heat kicks in, your boilers kick on.
Lights on more.
Yeah, maybe there's more lights. Yeah, you're losing the daytime lighting. The sun goes down. So you might say, well, temperature's out of our control, but you might look at what drives that temperature. Well, it's our HVAC equipment. And employees is driven by how do the employees behave? What conservation activities are they doing? What have we trained them on what to do? What expectations are we setting with our employees for shutting things off and looking for opportunities? So at first you might think these are out of your control, but when you look at what are the real drivers of energy for those, now you do have an activity and say, you know what, we're going to focus on our HVAC equipment and employee education because those are key drivers of our usage. We really ran into problems of trying to isolate down energy usage down to individual areas without having a lot of meters and stuff. By doing a slightly different approach and looking at bigger factors, we can start to isolate, at least give us somewhere to start until we got better metering equipment. Another way to look at it is just have some kind of like control limits around your usage. So as the data fluctuates month to month, we don't expect it to be constant. But we could put some limits around there, and the red line is kind of the target, what we'd expect the cost to be, or sorry, the usage to be, and then the black line is actual. And then we have some way to figure out, okay, it was higher but given the temperature and the number of employees, it is actually still in control. It's not something to be alarmed about. Or if we do go below that, then it tells us, okay, we got an issue, we need to dig into it. So that's the other thing, is just trying to predict and be forward-looking on what your cost and usage should be. That can be kind of difficult. And then through just your typical lean events, sometimes it's always good to have like an environment, safety, and health individual there to help address some of these potential problems that come up. But there's also a checklist available that the government Green Suppliers Network put out. Kind of things to think about if you don't have that representation in your event. Before you go and move equipment around or change ventilation or shift processes, there's things you want to keep in mind that you don't run into an issue or run into a roadblock when you're trying to implement those. So they provide this checklist, and it just breaks down, you know, physical environment type of things, the use, chemical storage and usage. So before you make any major changes, you kind of walk through these potential ideas before you get too far along and then have to go back and say we couldn't get that done. And then, you know, generation of waste, maybe you're moving where the waste is coming, maybe you're generating a different type of waste now. So just trying to understand some of those impacts. But ideally you could try to have somebody like an ES&H person on call at least to be able to go through some of those concerns as well.
So now that we've kind of gone through some of the tools to integrate lean and green, I want to talk a little bit about different ways to approach green manufacturing. What really, from my perspective, it's whatever works best for your company is the best way to do it. So we've talked a lot about how you can implement green as part of your lean system and part of your lean way of doing things. I also want to show you some other ways of doing it in terms of green as its own system, kind of in parallel to your lean activities, and you know, linking them up when it's appropriate. And really what this is a strategic versus operational decision. If you have a good lean process going and you want to try to get some basic green benefits out of that too, meet some stakeholder requests, make your customers happy, that type of thing, this is exactly what you want to do. If you want to go after a big strategic opportunity, going after green as a way to improve your business from almost like you have with lean, it can be implemented as its own system. And I think Brian was going to talk about this real quick before we get into some of that.
Yep.
Go ahead.
So here's just a couple takeaways for you on what you can do to try to integrate these concepts into your existing lean. The first one would be, you know, give your environment or the earth a voice in your processes. And so as a stakeholder or a customer in your SIPOC diagrams or your events, try to understand what's the environmental impact of some of these initiatives, and is there opportunity to at least consider or address some of those problems in your current lean activities. Next one is just to capture the benefits when they happen. So looking to see, you know what, we took care of packaging, but all these other, you know, we reduced our landfill charge in a slight amount by taking care of some of that packaging and capturing those benefits that you're already getting and just making them visible and aware, so you really do get a full picture of what's going on. And, or maybe that's going to be the additional benefits that put your project over the top and gets approval. So, you know, anytime you're taking non-value added tasks away, you're reducing space, reducing time between the processes or raw materials themselves. Those are good opportunities. And Mike mentioned adding the energy usage or cost into your data boxes on existing value stream maps. Make those, again, visible. Adding the waste examples into your definitions. At the beginning I showed 7 forms of waste with some environmental examples. Incorporate those into your definitions and into your training material, so people start to think about those types of waste. We mentioned earlier, you know, try to tie these issues back to core part of your business. And a lot of the things could be just from a cost perspective in terms of saving money. Other things could be actually risk mitigation to avoid having an issue or something going wrong where it could actually negatively impact your company reputation. So try to understand what's what do your customers feel are important? What do you feel as a company is important? And try to tie these initiatives back to that. Because that's going to get a lot more leverage and say, hey, just want to do this because we want to be a green company. Or you can have a dedicated effort to go after specific environmental waste. So what are those 5 wastes we talked about? What's W? Water. What's A?
Air.
Okay. S?
Solids.
Solids. Toxins. What was the last one?
Energy.
Good job. So going after those specifically, identifying those, looking at it across the whole facility, and then focus your lean efforts on that particular reduction. And so then you can look at a lot bigger opportunity when you roll it all up together. And then I showed you the checklist to try to integrate that into your event templates and activities to make sure those things are being considered. And then finally, there's a resource slide at the very end here that share with your other lean practitioners and your ES&H individuals. Make sure they're at least aware of the resources that are already out there, and they might find something valuable in there that might pertain exactly to your business needs.
Okay, so implementing a green manufacturing system within your facility follows a very similar path to how you've gone through with the lean. So we've talked about the waste acronym, right? And the other key thing in green manufacturing is the 4 R's process is kind of the approach we use. So everybody's heard of the 3 R's, right? Reduce, reuse, recycle. So we have a 4th one first, so refuse, right? So how can you not buy that material? How can you not use that energy at all? How can you not buy chemicals? That question is a hard question. So we go into a lot of companies to talk to them about green manufacturing, or have a lot of people come to us and ask about green, and they say, I'm recycling, I'm okay, I'm recycling. And so from our perspective, it's great, you're just above the bottom. You've got a ton of opportunity here. So recycling is a good thing to do. It's a wonderful first step. You're going to break even if you do recycling activities. This is where you make your money, right? So instead of just recycling, can you reuse it within your plant? So you're not buying it and then giving it away. You're buying it and using it multiple times. Can you reduce it? So buy less of that product. That's when you're going to start to get real cost benefits. Or even better, can you refuse it? Never buy it at all. Don't use it. That is green, refusing. There is one thing that a lot of people miss. So especially in the solid waste area, when you are going after reduced waste, your goal or zero landfill, those types of things, is to eliminate the disposal activities. One step that a lot of people don't realize is energy recovery. Anybody here use any energy recovery activities? Or suppliers? Do you guys? Things can be burned. Ames. Anybody know what Ames does with its waste? City of Ames?
They have a big incinerator.
Yep, we burn it all. So we actually, our disposal for the city of Ames is almost none. We get energy recovery out of that. Now, there's environmental trade-offs to that. But we don't have a landfill in this city of Ames. We don't have a landfill in Story County anymore. That has its strengths and weaknesses. But so energy recovery is an alternative opportunity. There may be companies near you who burn and have incinerators and those types of things, where what you're throwing away now, something that can't be recycled, and you're throwing away can be burned. That can be good if it's the right product at the right time, and it usually needs to be pretty close to you to be fiscally viable. So. Talk a little bit about some of the tools we offer and some of the ways we help companies get into the green. And it's really what you're going to see a little sample of for the next couple hours here. First of all, we have a Green 101 course. Everybody's done Lean 101s out there, right? And some of the basic simulations and that kind of stuff. That's really what our Green 101 is. We go through what is green, simple tools and explanations about the waste acronym. So for each one, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the key components, give some basic education, and then tools to go through the 4R process on it. you guys will get to see, so really what this is it's fundamentals of green with a 3-part exercise kind of woven throughout. And after we take a break here, we're gonna move the tables around a little. And you guys are gonna do part 1 of the simulation, and then since you guys are nice advanced lean people here, we're gonna jump right to part 3 after. So you guys are gonna kind of see a little bit of the before and after. And going through this, you'll see everybody who's gone through a Lean 101 says, wait a second, I didn't really do much green, all I did was lean. And that's part of the point of it, is that from a basic perspective, when you're looking at a manufacturing line, lean and green are so incredibly close. In this simulation, what you'll see is a lot of the activities that you'll do are things that you might have thought of from the green side, where it's just a little expanded here. We'll talk a little bit about the business management side in this course, and with the implementation action plan. If anybody wants to talk about doing this at your company, or knows of a few companies that they'd like us to come out and hold a full day workshop, these are 8-hour workshops. It's a fairly action-packed day. We'd be happy to talk to you at the end of the class here. The other key thing that we do is dumpster dive. It's a fun name, and it's exactly what it sounds, and that's the other activity we're going to do this morning. We've got some simulated trash here. I promise you the only stuff that was actually trash has been cleaned, and we actually bought a lot of it too, so trying to make it as safe as possible. But this is the process you can go through. So that 4 R's process, we've got another nice acronym here. Instead of just waste, you dive. So you want to go through your trash, you want to divide that trash up, investigate what it is, verify the root causes, and then eliminate it. Go through the 4 R's process. And it's a fairly simple concept, and one of the reasons we wanted to show it to you this morning is to show you, while it's really easy to put an acronym up on the board and just say dump out your trash and divide, investigate, verify, eliminate, there are some unusual things about it. It's a little harder than it looks on first sight. Anybody ever done a dumpster dive before? Couple? They're fun, right?
They're with the right people.
With the right people. My big fear, and we've talked about it, but luckily we haven't done it, is dumpster dive with a food company. There are a lot of food companies in the state. We've done some waste investigation with food companies. Trash is one thing when you're making parts. It's a whole nother beast when it's food. These dumpster dives are simple events. You can do them in 1 or 2 days. They align really well with a lean effort. So this is something you can do kind of as part of your lean program. This is an example. These are some of Brion's dumpster dives that he's done. But it gives you kind of ideas of what it looks like, and you'll see this as you do it later. Some of the key features of it: safety, 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 safety. Use correct protective equipment and all that type of thing. You don't know what's in your trash. I promise you don't know what's in your trash. Especially if you leave your trash bins outside unlocked. You really don't know what's in your trash because other people are putting stuff in your trash too, not just you. And that's one of the things that is a fairly typical find. You go through, you dump out your trash, and we're going to have some tarps laid out here. You sort it into categories, and then from there, it's no different than lean. You've got your breakdowns of what your wastes are, and then you're going to go through the root cause analysis, and then you're going to say, now that we understand what's creating this waste, how do we eliminate it? And that's really the process that you're going to see here. This is the setup that we'll do, and I'll put this up when we go to do it in a little while, so you guys can kind of understand how it's going to work. But really, one of the things we found is, and it makes it seem kind of boring at points, but it's a better way to do it, is you've got your trash receptacle. You have certain people whose only job is to take stuff out of the trash and put it on a tarp or put it into a specific area. You have certain people whose only job is to sort that waste. And then you've got people weighing it, and then you have scribes. It's a lot better when you've got a whole bunch of people kind of running into trash and tearing it apart and throwing it in places. It's not quite as organized, and you're not going to get as good results, and it's a lot less safe. When you start to break it down into specific tasks and roles, you're going to get a lot more consistency with how you sort your trash. one of the things you'll see here is the sorting in the decisions that you felt were easy are no longer easy. Sorting plastic, is it just plastic, or do you have to sort by the recyclable number, or whether it's recyclable or not? And there's a whole bunch of different types of ways you can sort things. I see somebody smiling. You've had that problem before, right? So it's nice and easy to say, oh wow, look, 18% of our trash is plastic. All we have to do is get rid of the plastic. Well, no, 18%. You have to go and break that down and say, well, okay, this is the recyclable parts of it. So here's my LDPEs, and let's just figure out how to recycle that. Well, that's not even so simple. You have to figure out, some of that LDPE comes from a certain process where it's contaminated, some of it doesn't, and it's a fairly lengthy process to go through and break it down. But what we found is it is worth it. We have had a lot of companies go through this, either after our trainings or on their own for some other things, and really what we found is there is a return on investment. Companies make money off of doing this. There's a company not too far from here, West Liberty Foods, that has made a lot of news in the last year. They're one of the first food manufacturing plants in the country to go zero waste. They have 3 facilities that are zero waste, and they've gotten a lot of credit for that, and they've said that it's improved their visibility across the country. If anybody sees the commercials, the Arby's commercials, when they show the factory that cuts the meat for Subway, that's them in the commercials. So, but they've done a lot of neat stuff, and they've saved a lot of money from it, and from what they say, they've actually earned some good reputation from it. Resources. I'll turn it over to Brian to kind of hit on the resources before we...
So yeah, this is just kind of a list of things that we've seen that we think is pretty valuable here. Again, you're going to get this handout at the end of the conference, but depending on the things that you are interested in, either energy management, a lot of this simulation came out of the Purdue Green Manufacturing Program. Like I said, EPA has quite a few activities in here about toolkits on lean and energy, lean and environment, professional guide for lean and Six Sigma, Green Supplier Network. All those are really good resources, and I don't know if people are familiar with them or not. I wasn't until just the last couple of years, so there's a lot of good stuff out there already, and encourage you to kind of take a look at those and see what might be interested for you and your facility.
Okay, simulation. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a 5-10 minute break to set up for the simulations here. What we're going to be doing is we're going to move the tables around a little. So they're going to kind of be in an L shape here, so you guys are a little closer to each other. And we are going to do a lean and green micro wind turbine, in other words, a pinwheel. And you guys, the vast majority of you are going to have jobs in this company. You're going to go through and do kind of the before, and it's intentionally kind of a clumsy process. It has not been leaned out, it has not been green. And then what we're going to do, so that's going to be about a 30-minute exercise. Then we're going to do a clip of the dumpster dive process to give you guys a chance to actually go in and start to sort material and understand a little bit more about how that process works. Then we're going to come back and do the after on the micro wind turbine process, where you'll see kind of some of the lean and green tools that have been applied and some of the results of that. Kind of that's the beginning of our day in our Green 101 and the end of our day in our Green 101 to get you a feel for what the changes are. And we'll show you a little bit of some of the results of that in terms of cost benefits for this simulated company going after both lean opportunities and green opportunities. So I think that's our last slide here. Take a 5-10 minute break. We'll start to move the tables around and get you guys all set up, and then we'll reconvene.
Yeah.